Lawyers of Reddit, what was your "oh now you fucked up" moment? Unfortunately, my best story for this is from my own client. We had a client who was on the board of directors for a company and was being sued for allegedly not telling the board something. His part of the case was really only a smaller part of a larger and more complicated case, so while there were a lot of other issues in the case overall, the entire case against him specifically essentially boiled down to whether or not he told the board about X. I and few other attorneys spent an entire week, 9 AM to 5 PM or later, Monday through Friday, prepping this client for his deposition by going over every document in the case with him and explaining why it was important. On several occasions we reiterated that no matter what else happened in the case, as long as we can show that he told the board about X, he was fine. The day of the deposition arrives. Opposing counsel sits down and starts questioning our client. In the first 5 to 10 minutes of the dep, opposing counsel straight up asks our client what he told the board. Client responds, "I told them about Y, I told them about Z, I told them about A, B, and C, and says nothing about X." Literally the only issue in the case against him. In 20 plus years of practice, it was the closest I've ever come to rage quitting on a client. I was tangentially involved in a custody dispute. Dad alleged mom was doing all sorts of things and he should have the kid. Dad's attorney grilled mom for about 20 minutes on texts she had sent claiming to sell her prescriptions. She wouldn't admit it. Dad's attorney moved on and eventually ended with, "One more question. Where did you get the pills you were selling?" Mom responds without thinking, "Oh, my doctor prescribed them." Years ago I worked in personal injury and we had a woman come to us saying that she slipped and fell outside of a nail salon because they hadn't swept up the wet leaves outside the door. So we take the case and almost immediately we get a call from opposing counsel saying he's going to courier us something important. We open it, pop the disk in the computer, and right there is security cam footage of our client picking up the wet leaves, putting them on the sidewalk, and sitting down on them before calling for help. I have never facepalmed so hard. Needless to say, we dropped the case. Had a bylaw officer harass me almost constantly for 8 months for violating a bylaw. I had parked my motorcycle in my driveway. He ordered me to remove it and tried to levy fines for the violation. He went after my landlord and tried to get me evicted. Eventually, I got a lawyer and filed a complaint. When asked to point to the bylaw I was breaking, he didn't even read it out, which basically read, "No parking or storing anything in a driveway other than an automobile." He seriously thought a motorcycle wasn't an automobile, because an automobile is a car. When I hired my lawyer and showed him the case, he said, "I'm not taking new clients right now, but I'll make an exception, because I'm personally offended that this is happening to you." Everything was thrown out, and I'm currently working on getting my legal fees and extra payments for all the harassment. A doctor testifying under oath that he deliberately chose not to inform a pregnant woman of a positive test result for a really severe genetic disorder because he figured because she was a member of his church she wouldn't have considered aborting the pregnancy under any circumstances. A primary care doctor who received a complex and technical test report from a genetics lab and simply forwarded it to the patient, who didn't really speak English and wasn't medically educated. She testified that she performed the minimum required diligence, which is not what you should say and expect a good outcome. This was in a custody dispute, jury trial. We represented the father of young twins, and the mother wanted child support. The issue was that, for the past 3 years, they had been sharing the kids exactly 50-50, as in he got a weekend, she got a weekend. One of them got Monday, Tuesday, the other got Thursday, Friday, and they split Wednesday. There was no reason not to have a shared custody order with each parent paying their own expenses, but she thought she could get more, so there we were. The thing was, she did not have a case. She kept taking the kids to CPS and child psychologists before the trial to make a reason why she should have primary custody, but we managed to get all of that excluded. So on the day of the trial, her big argument is that these kids have asthma, severe asthma, the kind of asthma that requires special equipment, and the father is ignoring these issues. He's negligent. He's endangering them. She should have custody. The trial is generally going our way. She's not a great witness, she doesn't have any medical records to back up these allegations, and we have the children's daycare teacher testifying that she doesn't know anything about any special equipment or severe asthma. But the moment that sealed the deal came when the mother called her last witness. The last witness to testify was the children's grandmother, the mother's mother. The jury already knew that she frequently babysat the two kids and that her apartment was often a drop-off location for the kids. The mother swore that the grandmother never smoked in front of the kids and that her apartment was not a dangerous environment for asthmatic children. The grandmother was called last minute by the mother as a rebuttal witness. As she took the stand, the grandmother leaned over into the microphone and cleared her throat. Ahem. It was a 2 or 3 second long expression of smoky phlegm. I don't recall exactly what the grandmother said in her testimony, but I remember she sounded like decades of 3-pack a day smoking when she said it. After a half hour of deliberations, the jury awarded primary custody to the father. He immediately started crying, while the mother sat motionless. It was a good result. Not a lawyer, but a law student. This was in a case that my professor showed us in class. Some guy was accused of something, I cannot remember what, but the judge spoke him free because there wasn't enough evidence he had done it. Guy said, "Thank you, judge, I'll never do it again." Dan appealed and got him convicted. Not a lawyer, but this happened to me. I was living in an abusive household where my partner, the roommate, and 2 of their friends were terrorizing me. I gave them 1 month's notice and moved out. They put some of my stuff on the lawn the day after I told them. It was horrible, but I got through it. Then, they tried to take me to small claims court and get like $3,500 from me for violating the lease. I didn't. I read it like 10 times and checked with the leasing office. Want to know what they didn't bring to show the judge? A copy of the fucking lease. The case was denied, and I never spoke to them again. I moved into a 3-bedroom townhouse with my son Kevin and 2 of his friends that he vouched for. I trusted his judgment. Once we were all living together, it became clear that the 2 friends were not trustworthy roommates. They gave another girl a key to our place, and apparently I was a petty bitch for not liking her and for wanting the key back. Matt was nice enough, but he tried to leave for the summer to a secluded internet-free camp without paying for rent. We worked it out, and he wasn't around for the majority of the shit show. I count him as a friend in this story because he wasn't around most of the time. The other, Jason, went through 6+ jobs in 5 months, couldn't pay rent on time ever, and was emotionally unstable, like getting drunk every night and punching things, and projecting his mental health issues onto me. Over the summer he progressively became more toxic, screaming at me through the vents about how I was such a childish bitch for not wanting to spend time around him, demanding I clean up after him because I had off work that day, and generally stomping around the house accusing me of being toxic because I wanted to have alone time after work. And my boyfriend changed. He became mean and did nothing when his friends verbally assaulted me, and he even said that I was a depression blob, and maybe if I didn't act like a bitch his friends wouldn't call me that. They stayed up late gossiping about me, talking about how bad I was in bed, how I needed to pull my weight more around the house, and how I was terrible for sis. So I moved out, dumped him, and blocked the fuckers. I can't remember most of my time living there. I have PTSD, unrelated, and block out bad things. So, picture it, mother and father are in a custody dispute. Mother's not making a lot of money, but she's hustling as best as she can to take care of her kids. Father's a deadbeat. He actually was supposed to originally have primary custody, but skipped out, so she's been taking care of them for a couple years, and now she wants primary custody officially transferred to her, and he's fighting it, because he's a narcissist. Anyways, in many jurisdictions, in addition to the lawyer for each side, assuming that the person isn't arguing pro se, like the father in this case, because not everyone can afford a lawyer, or thinks that they need one. When there's a child involved, the court appoints a guardian ad litem, who represents the child. The guardian ad litem interviews the parents, interviews the child, does some basic investigating, and reports to the judge about their assessment. In this case, the guardian ad litem said outright that the mother was probably the better bet, but he thinks that both parents should take a drug test just in case. Both parents had previous substance abuse problems, and both claimed to be clean. Well, the judge has no problem with any of that and sends the parents off to be tested right then. Social services sent someone to administer the tests, I believe. That's done. Everybody comes back to the courtroom. Judge reads the results out loud. Mother tested negative for everything. Father tested positive for cocaine. Now, as the mother's attorney and the guardian ad litem, made sure to emphasize, cocaine doesn't stay detectable for very long. Either the father used it very recently, he admitted in court that he'd gone to a party and done a line of coke, or he was such a habitual user that it remained detectable for longer. The party that he'd been at was the previous weekend, which was outside of the approximate 3-day range that cocaine remains in your system. So if that was indeed the only time he'd used coke, then he must have been doing lines non-stop the week before for it to linger so long. Things really did not go well for him after that. Mother ended up with primary custody of the kids. Father ended up looking like a real tool in front of the judge. My father as a young lawyer was trying to get a case to take place in one state and not another because the insurance laws were more favorable in state A. The company he was in litigation with wanted it in state B for that reason and claimed they only distributed in state A but had no locations in it and should not have to go to court in state A. Well, this company was a soda company and my dad has a major diet soda addiction. He goes through at least a 12-pack a day. So they were in a meeting with the soda company lawyers and took a break and he went downstairs to get a diet soda. When it came out, he noticed on the can that it said distributed by the soda company of state A. So he got another diet soda and brought that one upstairs to the meeting. The soda co decided to settle after that. This was in the late 70s or early 80s, I believe. I was involved in a civil suit against an organization that allegedly allowed and attempted to cover up the sexual assault of an at-risk population. During a deposition of a victim, the opposing counsel began asking an aggressive line of questions accusing the deposed of having been convicted of making false reports in the past and convictions for forgery and identity theft. After our client answered with a simple no to about a dozen of these questions, opposing counsel became belligerent, eventually basically signaling that at trial he would be producing mugshots, as well as conviction records, as well as charges for perjury, and right about at that point he becomes ghost white, pulls very close to his face what is clearly a photo he had in a folder, looks at it closely, then shoves it back in, and asks to conclude the deposition. He had pulled records on the wrong person. I later found this other person, and while their names were the same, the ages were more than 15 years apart. Not a lawyer, but my cousin is. He had a deposition via Zoom during this pandemic, and the plaintiff's counsel shared his screen to present an exhibit. My cousin notices a tab on the guy's internet browser, showing that he was trying to look at my cousin's Facebook profile, which is set to private. Deposition ends and he says so. Once last question. Do you like my profile picture? Plaintiff's counsel immediately hung up the call. Maybe not the biggest fuck up, but gotta be pretty embarrassing. Posted this one a little while ago, but it does fit here. Not a lawyer, but I have a similar type of experience to share. Where I live, municipal zoning rights are controlled by a board that has a nickname of the Green Taliban. So named because they are drop dead heart attack serious about anything to do with environmental regulations. I live in one of the most left-wing, environmentally conscious areas of the country. Their answer to anything that isn't 100% in compliance with the most stringent environmental codes is almost always no. Anyways, this millionaire decides to move out to the area and buys an acreage. His plans for developing the land include creating an artificial cave for wine tasting parties by blasting one into a cliff using mining explosives, and creating a new stream by draining a water body located on the property. Needless to say, these actions were rather controversial amongst the community, and he had to have a public hearing, which I attended, in front of the zoning board to explain himself. After a couple of pointed questions from the board, he loudly groused, "You know where I come from, a very conservative part of the country. As it turns out, if we want to build a road, and there's a lake in the way, we move the lake." That was about the point where I thought to myself, yeah, you definitely just lost your case. Congratulations on passing into local legend, though. not a lawyer, but this story still applies. My parents have a jewelry store and the landlord was trying to extort them to sign a lease for nearly double what it was appraised for. Problem was, the lease they signed, and the landlord signed, said when they renewed the lease both parties were to get their own appraiser then meet in the middle of what the two prices were. Landlord didn't like what his appraiser said, so he refused to tell my parents what the appraisal was. So for 2 years he sent every lawyer in town to try to kick them out. They tried everything but legally had no leg to stand on. Well, unfortunately during this time the landlord developed Parkinson's and his mind started to go. We finally got him to do a deposition and that's where everything went to hell for him. It was like he drank a truth serum. He just told all. My parents' lawyer would ask things like, "Why did you not show the appraisal to my clients?" And he'd say, "It wasn't what I wanted. I wanted them to pay more, so I hired other appraisers and paid them off to raise the price nearly double." Or another one was, "Why did you want them to pay you in gold that you would then sell back to them? Remember it's a jewelry store," he said. "Oh, I didn't want to pay taxes." It was sad honestly. His lawyer by the end of it all just had his head in his hands. We had a new lease within a month for less than we originally even offered, and he had to pay back 75% of our legal fees. Nearly $100,000.